Welcome back to the Michael Maher Show, everyone. Today is Wednesday, June 30th, 2021. This is episode 58, and we have a phenomenal episode for you today. I'm joined by Chancellor, aka The Glue, at Chancellor2U on social media. He's an operating partner with Tyson Fury, who's the undefeated boxing heavyweight champion of the world, and he has made business and friendships with high-profile entertainers such as Jay-Z, Neymar, Chris Rock, Shaq, and many more in between. Thank you so much for joining me right off the bat. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, brother. It's a pleasure.
Yep. And first question that I have for you is, how did you build some of those friendships, some of those big names that I just dropped? Can you elaborate a little bit on how you made those connections?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I truly do. And I think people get confused sometimes. The reality is this, right? If you treat every single person the same, you'll get great results. Maybe not immediately, but long-term you will. What I mean by that is whether I'm dealing with, head of the royal family, a CEO of a company, a janitor, a bus driver, a fireman, a policeman, the local person working at the laundromat, it really doesn't matter. Even if they're homeless, everyone's equal. All we are worth one. And everyone's worth one. And if you treat life like that, you'll make great friendships. I've always just looked at every person as putting one shoe on at a time. And with that being said, that's how I approach every person. So the relationships I have, they start back, I think we talked about it a little bit. My first boxing match, I didn't have resources by any means. And I certainly wasn't plugged in at the time. It was years ago. I went out to first boxing match out in Las Vegas. And I purposely waited. You're going to get a kick out of this. So I purposely waited till about 15 minutes of the fight starting. And I was irritated in my room. I had gone out to Vegas, with some older guys that were like venture capitalist type guys or private equity. And they all had money. And I just, kind of went out for the first time in Vegas, like, oh, wow, this is cool. Didn't have a lot of money, didn't have a lot of resources, and made a decision that, they're all going to the fight and I'm in my room. And I didn't want to tell them at the time that I didn't have enough money to buy a ticket. The reality is I waited on purpose because I was in my room trying to figure out how I was going to get to that fight because nothing was going to stop me from getting that fight. So, luckily I had a nice suit. I threw the suit on and I went to the red carpet 15 minutes late.
That's
Why
crazy.
I went there 15 minutes late, I knew if I walked up with confidence. I remember when I was in a sales training, in one of the jobs I had when I was younger, they more or less taught us about firm, polite, authoritative commands, FPAC. I remember walking up to the lady at the gate and I just looked at her and I said, bring me to my seat, please. And I gave her the hand action and I even turned my back. At the time I was wearing a watch and turned my back to her. And I remember the click. And as soon as I heard that click, I knew that was the red carpet opening for me. I didn't belong on the red carpet. I wasn't invited to be on the red carpet. But as soon as I heard that click, it was like a very loud noise, as quiet as it was, because I knew that was my access. The other reason why I went 15, 20 minutes late was because I knew everyone would already be seated and I wouldn't be fully embarrassed and exposed that I didn't even have a ticket to get in the fight. So I walked down into the front. There were a couple seats next to Shaquille O'Neal. I didn't know Shaq at the time. And I knew if I sat next to him, it'd be way too obvious. So I purposely sat like 10 rows away from him, 10 seats away, I should say, right down front. And I'm sitting there the whole time, hoping that no one will recognize that I don't even have a ticket, right? So put yourself in that position. You're a young guy. You're not supposed to really be there. You didn't lie. You just said, take me to my seat, please. And there I am sitting, 10 seats from Shaq. Well, from that night, I realized that if you believe in something, you can really do anything. And you don't need to lie, cheat, or steal to get there. You just have to be creative and you have to show up. Showing up is half the battle. So I went over to the seats. I sat there for a while. It was amazing. I was like, wow, this is really cool. All the guys up above that had brought me out there, the private equity guys, they're kind of looking down like, Jesus, how did you get those seats? And I didn't really say anything. I just smiled, right? That's all you can do. So that night we went out and a couple of Shaq's guys noticed me as sitting ringside. We went out to one of the clubs and we ended up getting together. And from there, more or less, like my relationship started not fully with Shaq, but with the people around Shaq. And I knew better not to be in his way because what resources did I really have to offer? Nothing. I don't like to be around people if I don't have things to offer. So I more or less became pretty close with some of Shaq's guys, and that grew into a great relationship, just being resourceful for things they potentially didn't have or things they needed. And I would just be, I guess, the glue that would bring things together. So
That's a
I hope
phenomenal
that
story.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal story. Do you remember, or obviously you do, what hotel was it at, or what arena?
So that was, I believe, at the MGM Grand. Not to date myself, the fight was, quite a while ago, and we ended up going to the Palms Casino. And the Palms Casino at the time was made very famous by the MTV Real World. They had a Real World suite and everything. It was really cool. I think it was like it was one of the clubs at the Palms Hotel, and that's where it was like, my first like hanging out, let's say, with the industry, if you will. So that was kind of the first thing. I'll always remember that.
So do you think you've made a lot of your connections in Vegas?
I would say more Miami. My friend was a promoter. He more or less ran Miami. His name's Justin Levine, Empire Events. Kid's awesome. He more or less, and he had two other partners. One is since, he's gone on to his religion. He's a Jewish guy, and he doesn't have much to do with the spotlight. The other one, I don't really know what happened to him. I don't speak to him anymore. I still speak to his partner, Perry, who's a great guy. But Justin was, kind of the head of it, young guy, certainly didn't need money, didn't really need anything, but he was such a driven promoter. And I'll never forget how driven he was, even though he already had everything. So he and I had built a relationship through me, going into Miami, bringing people, spending money at the clubs and so on. But I was never into drinking or drugs. So it was always like, I knew that was the club I wanted to be in because I couldn't get in the country club. In the United States, I don't care what anyone tells you. If you're not born into the country club in the right zip code, from the right family and the right heritage, like the lineage of the family name, you're not getting in the country club. So it was easier to get into the nightclubs and work magic within the nightclubs and make relationships within the nightclubs. It's a wonderful, wonderful network of wonderful people. And that's kind of the network beginning, if you will. So I hope I answered that question clearly.
Yeah, no, you definitely did. I love your elaboration on it too. But now, how has social media changed the way that you make connections? And
yes, so social media, has made it easier, but it's also made it worse, right? So before it was like, you'd meet someone, they liked you, that was it. It was a handshake, you got along. Social media has been great for connecting the dots, but it's also been terrible for causing traffic. There's a lot of people that with the internet cause traffic. That's what I call it. And it's just people getting in the way of the people that actually are efficient and can get deals done and things done. I invested in a tour. Some young kid called up and said, "Hey, I got a buddy of a buddy of a buddy." And I'm like, "Okay, what is it?" And, I had made some money back in the day when I was younger working. And he wanted me to invest in the social media tours. Vine was the name of it. And I'm like, what is Vine? I didn't know. I wasn't that plugged in, right? And I said, you know what? I'm smart enough to always keep my ear to the ground to the younger generation. So they had this Vine tour, and I was like fascinated, like with the idea of it. I'm like, you know what? Whatever, I'll go. My friends are like, you're an idiot. So I went, and I remember walking in and going like, what is going on? Like, I don't know this world, and this world doesn't know me. And I want to know more about this world because I've never seen such fandemonium. So more or less, I ended up flying down to Dallas. I jumped onto a tour bus after investing in it. And I rode the tour bus, and I literally just sat up the front of the tour bus because there's a lot of young, kids that were the acts and so on. And it was a little bit crazy. There were chaperones in the bus, but they were controlling the chaperones. These kids they were comical. And, this was the whole group of like, the era of, the names like the Cameron Dallases of the world, the bigger names, Nash Greer, Hayes Greer wasn't even around yet. There was like Matt Espinoza, I think Taylor Kniff. They were nice kids. They were just young kids and crazy. There was the kid Mendez who went on to have a great career. They were kind of like the original Vine crew. And Jake Paul, Logan Paul, they were cool dudes like coming up. People like to talk about them, but I'll tell you what, those kids earned their stripes, and they never stopped earning their stripes. So these kids were selling out the House of Blues. And I knew the music industry from like my partnership and relationship with Timbaland. And I said, this is wild that these kids are selling out the House of Blues. And their talent wasn't that obvious. They'd go up on stage and everyone knew they were lip syncing, and they would go up on stage, and it was more about just the emotional equity that these little kids had in who they thought were their stars due to the meet and greets, due to the Vine, activation and so on. So I saw this whole other world, and I went on like 6 different cities seeing this. I'm like, this is crazy. I need to be more plugged into this world. Ultimately, Vine failed. And with the failure of Vine, we ended up, I didn't have anything to do with Vine, but with the failure of it, I recognized that there was a huge opportunity, and I was going to find that opportunity. So a lot of it in the beginning was a learning process, if you will, of why it makes sense and why it doesn't. And then I more or less just paid my tuition. The tour wasn't financially successful from an investment standpoint because you had young kids running the tour, but I didn't really care about that. I more cared about the long run and the long haul of what could happen. And kind of, that's where we are today. I've paid my tuition. I have the experience, and I understand how things work and how things don't work.
Yeah. So many of those young influencers that are still prominent today came from that app Vine, like you said. But to throw it back to one of the names that we started with earlier in the episode, Jay-Z, we spoke briefly a couple of days ago talking about how you brought Jay-Z and Beyonce to meet the royal family of Saudi Arabia. And also you went to the French White House, you could say, with them. But specifically the bringing them to meet the royal family of Saudi Arabia. What can you tell us about your experience with Jay-Z, Beyonce, and how that whole meeting came about?
Yeah, so it was cool. The first time was Pierre Sarkozy, through a mutual friend I was introduced to. I was on tour with Timbaland and Timberlake, met Pierre Sarkozy. He was the French president's son. Really nice kid. No one knew he was going to be, that he was the president's son yet. His dad wasn't the president. No one even really knew who his dad was, I guess. We didn't know who the kid was. He was just kind of like a really cool skateboarding looking kid that was hanging out, and he was young and he was harmless. So I said, why not let this kid hang out? He's harmless. He's nice. He's clean. He's not causing problems. The kid just kind of hung around the hotel lobby. He was just kind of into hip hop. We were on tour and made a friendship, an organic friendship, and kept in touch. And, he was 19 or 20 at the time. And I recognized he ended up calling me and inviting me. He's like, hey, I want you to come to my dad's party. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? He's like, well, I want you to come to his party. I didn't know that his dad became the president of France. I thought his dad just got a promotion in his company. So I wasn't able to go to the party. We talked and I said, look, send my best. I'm busy with other things. I wanted to go, but at the time I couldn't. I said, look, we'll do something cool. I promise. So I saw Jay-Z and Beyonce were heading out over there for the French Open. And I think they were on tour at the time, if my memory serves me correctly. I reached out, talked to Jay and Beyonce, and more or less said, look, why don't we have lunch at, the Royal Palace, the Champ d'Elysées, for the Sarkozy family. And it was funny because in the beginning, it's you have 2 groups. You have the one group, which the Sarkozy, they don't want to appear too thirsty, right? And Jay-Z and Beyonce don't want to appear too thirsty about who's inviting who and who's, So I came up with the word hosting instead of saying invite, right? Because no one wants to send the first invite.
That's brilliant.
It's very Hollywood. So, I guess when you say, why do they call you the glue? I came up with the word hosting. I thought hosting took everyone's guards down. And with that guard coming down, it's something that I recognized as the beginning of taking people's guard down. I think the greatest example is I was in a company, and I was a board member of one of the companies in one of the original investors. I brought in an investment group with Soleil Corvo. So Soleil was, I think, the greatest person who's ever in the history of the internet in the world was able to bring people into an easier barrier of entry. And most people don't know what he did. Do you know what he did?
No, I don't.
He created the like button for Facebook. And he's a friend of mine. Why that was so important is this, if you think about it. You introduced me to one of your friends when Facebook first came around, okay? Mm-hmm. it'd be really awkward and creepy for me to comment on someone you just introduced me to Facebook post, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I like their post, it's kind of like cool. It's like,
It's a little
hey, it's like
casual.
a wave. It's like a wave. Like, hey, it's casual. So whenever he created that, that was just so brilliant, and that's why he's one of the first employees over at Facebook and one of Zuck's best friends and so on. I just always found that fascinating. So back to Jay-Z and Beyonce, not to digress. I put that together. I was able to get them all together, which was a job in itself. And once everyone sat down, there was about 6 of us. It was me, Beyonce, Jay, Carla Bruni, President Sarkozy, and I think Pierre was there too at the time, and maybe Carla's youngest son was bombing around. The kid was hilarious. About 6 or 7, just literally sprinting through the palace while trying to eat, throw, and stuff. Kid was awesome. I'll never forget it. But it was just so funny and so real to always be yourself, right? So there I am talking and hanging out, and Carla Bruni is just sitting there smoking cigarettes at the table like it was normal while she's eating her lunch. And, Jay and Beyonce just hanging out. And it was just a nice day. Then we went on to the French Open. And later on that night, we all met back up for dinner. I forgot the name of the restaurant. It was amazing. But we all ended up at L'Arc, which is the club that night. And Rafa Nadal was there. David Guetta was there with his ex-wife, Kathy Guetta. And it was just such a surreal experience of, here I was, a guy who kind of came from nowhere, and I'm in the middle of the mix here with the president of France and, everyone else. But at the same time, you have to feel good about who you are inside, and then everything around you works. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is that something you had to learn over a period of time, or do you still find yourself sometimes at a table with a bunch of, super popular celebrities, and you kind of just, I completely respect and appreciate that you said every human is the same and we all put our shoes on the same way. But have you ever been in a situation where you're just around a bunch of high profile celebrities and you're just kind of taken back for a second and just really appreciative of life and everything, I guess you could say?
What's funny is, I hate to say it, and I don't want to come across cocky.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Ever since I was little, I've always kind of felt like the star, because I have a sense of confidence that, I don't know, I've always kind of had it. I don't know if it was through sports, through, I was breakdancing at 5 years old on stages. I just never really cared about what everyone else thought. And I don't know where that comes from. I think just some people are born with it, right? Mm-hmm. The only time I ever really got starstruck was I was sitting down for the first time with Chris Rock. And I love Chris Rock. I think he is hilarious, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like,
yeah,
funny. It's hilarious. So picture yourself sitting there with Chris Rock, who you've always looked up to, and you're ready to have dinner and you're trying not to die laughing at everything he says, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the only time I kind of felt off my game, and we ended up becoming really good friends. We still talk, every week. Probably not every week. Every couple of weeks we talk, and whether it's we're going to the Celtics game, we have floor seats to the Celtics game, kind of hanging out there, or New York, or going on set with him. He's just been an amazing person. He's grown a lot. He's gone through a lot of things, with, his family life. And he's just a really cool dude, and he's very misunderstood. But he's always been, unbelievable towards me. And he's someone who I admire. But one of the things he said always stuck with me is, here we all want to be funny and be the comedian. I said, Chris, sometimes, you don't really get back to me. I said, is that just me? I'm not offended. We've been friends for, 10 years now. He says, no. He says, sometimes I need to be alone. And I said, alone? What? I don't care, dude. I don't bother you. What do you mean alone? He says, no. He said, it's not about you bothering me or anyone bothering me. He says, as a comedian, we need to be a little depressed and a little alone and a little isolated. And I just found that so crazy. But when you start learning about comedians, that's kind of the space they like to be in. They like to kind of be in, I guess, a sad world, so that the funniness is maybe intense. Does that?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And that's incredible that that just shows how real of a person he is, that he's not shy about letting you know that about himself, that he's just, he must be so true to himself. He definitely comes across as it. But another comedian that I've seen you hanging out with before is Kevin Hart. I absolutely love Kevin Hart. I was actually when I was working the other day, I was listening to a Kevin Hart podcast and I was dying half the time. You got any stories with Kevin Hart?
Like in person, off the stage, he's even funnier. Like he's that dude. There's no way to like explain it. The whole team around him are great guys. He's just funny. Like even just the stuff like talking about just being yourself, right? So I had some of the Saudi royal family members there, with me. One of them had just graduated from MIT, and Kevin had a concert in Boston. And he was just so funny.
Like naturally
towards
funny.
the princess. Like, yeah, just naturally funny towards the princess. Like we've kind of like he's tight with the royal family, the El Saud family, and I am too. Obviously, that's kind of like how Kevin. It's just so authentic that it's no matter what he says, you're gonna like accept it.
Yeah. Okay. Now should we jump into some Tyson Fury talk? Because like I started
Absolutely.
with at the top of the episode, operating partner with Tyson Fury, undefeated heavyweight boxing champion of the world. He's got a massive trilogy fight coming up against Deontay Wilder on July 24th. Let's kick back to the first fight though, where that was on December 1st, 2018 against Deontay Wilder. Tyson looked
Correct.
dominant all throughout the fight. Ended up getting knocked down in the 12th round, but then ended up getting up and winning the rest of the round, the remainder of the round, which to me as a fan was the most impressive thing I've seen in so long. Were you at that fight?
I actually wasn't at that fight at the time. Tyson is one of these people that just blows people away. Like he just blows people away the way he is and who he is. In regards to a fight, everyone forgets, right? It's a fight. Any punch can knock you out. We've all been in a fight. No one knows what's going to happen in a fight. Luckily, Tyson's an amazing boxer. But, Deontay Wilder can punch. He knocks people out cold. He can punch. Tyson knows that, and Tyson trains very, very, very hard. He's in, isolation right now, training off the grid, just doing what he does best. People get confused. Tyson's a gladiator. He wants to always fight. That's just how he is. He doesn't care about money, doesn't care about celebrity stuff. He really doesn't care about much. Obviously, he loves his wife and his kids and his family. We've spent a lot of time together. He doesn't really care about much. He truly is the Gypsy King. And I think, if anyone wants to understand Tyson better, if you go to that, the link with the FaZe Clan, I connected, my friends over at the FaZe Clan because FaZe Jarvis was looking to, he was having a big fight. Congrats, Jarvis. Nice KO, brother.
Great KO.
Yeah. So just like them two sitting there, we're out in the jet and we're kind of just like hanging out talking. And when Jarvis and Tyson got down to it, I think if anyone watches that clip, it's amazing how Tyson looks at the world and the advice he gives. And he's a very, very, very old soul. He's a warrior and there's really not much more. He's a very unique soul. He's difficult to understand if you're not listening. But if you're listening, Mm-hmm. A lot of people assume things about Tyson. They have zero clue.
Yeah, he just seems like someone that you just want to be around, like someone that you can always learn something from, regardless of the conversation. I just feel like from afar, I mean, obviously I don't know him personally, but it just seems like his mentality, he's just bulletproof and he's just an all around great guy. And, and that's just, it was great that he took the time, like in the middle of his training camp, to speak with someone who had an upcoming fight, his first fight. I mean, that was Jarvis's first boxing match, and it was on a massive stage in Miami. And is there anything that you can tell us about like other talks or conversations that Tyson's had with people in the past, getting them ready for combat?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the world would love to know, whether we're, going to NASCAR together. He literally sat there at NASCAR and talked to all the Gold Star families. The great Smith family, Bruton Smith and his children hosted us. They own all the motor speedways. They hosted us and had us out for the NASCAR event, the Charlotte Motor Speedway, the Coca-Cola 600. No one cued or told Tyson, hey, go out and talk to the Gold Star family. He literally just loves people. The Gold Star families are people that have lost loved ones or maybe had disabled loved ones due to, being in the military. Tyson literally spoke to every single person, took pictures with every single person. He really is the people's champ. Reminds me of another time when David Beckham, we were in Miami recently together, and David invited us after a night out at dinner. Hey, the next day, do you want to come out to the game? And David Gardner, who's his partner, David Beckham's like, yeah, why don't you come out? Like, awesome guys. We're like, yeah, let's go. It made perfect sense to go to the game because David Beckham broke the mold here in the United States for a UK guy. He blew up. I mean, except for the Beatles, right? Mm-hmm. But he just blew up and got so big. And I said, this really makes perfect sense. When we went to the Inter Miami soccer game, it was awesome. Tyson was never told to take thousands and thousands of pictures because no one really tells him what to do. People will learn that quick being around him. Not only is he huge and he can fight, he's just a strong-willed guy.
Yeah.
But he literally took pictures with almost every single person in the place because, as he says, I'm the people's champ. And he lives by that.
That's honestly phenomenal to hear because I can just imagine there's so many celebrities now that just get caught up in their own hype and don't really take time for the smaller conversations that can lead to bigger life changes. I mean, like, you don't know, like encountering 1,000 people in one day at a NASCAR race, what you might hear from some of those people that might inspire you or motivate you in ways that other conversations couldn't from people of the similar stature.
What Tyson, I love, you go to Starbucks or you go to, the supermarket with Tyson. He might stop, we might stop together, talk to homeless people for hours, not for the cameras because the cameras aren't rolling. You'll never see that on camera. But because Tyson said something to me one day that always stuck with me. He said, Den, you don't know if that's an angel of God. Just because that person right now appears as a person who's homeless or strung out or having issues, doesn't mean that they are not an angel of God. They could just be disguised as what we're seeing them now. Who are we to make decisions on who we speak to and who we don't? Let's speak to everyone. I love that because that's always how I've been, as I told you from the beginning.
That's beautiful. And that's why he's the best. And that's why you guys are at the top of where you are. I mean, just because you treat everyone the same and you're just very in tune with the moment. You know what I mean? You never think too far ahead. You're just, like you said, you could just be at Starbucks and next thing you know, an hour's gone by and you're just having conversations with homeless people. You're very aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
I think it's a great thing. Okay.
Thank you.
On to, or back to the fight. So we said the first fight was on December 1st, 2018. That ended up being a draw. Rematch was on February 22nd, 2020. Tyson absolutely dominated that fight, top to bottom, until he got the knockout. It was great to see. I mean, I always do.
Cool. It was cool.
It was phenomenal. I always have, I was back at school for it, at college. And we always do watch parties. Like, we're going to have a watch party for the July 24th one. And it was
awesome.
Just, everyone was going nuts. I mean, because everyone there wanted Tyson to win just because, I mean, like literally everyone there.
All the boys that said, let's go.
Yeah. No. And I'm rooting for Tyson again on July 24th, as are all my friends. The party will be a little bit bigger this time because it's summer. But what do you think Tyson could do differently in the third fight? That, I mean, he doesn't need to do anything differently because he dominated the rematch. But
there's only one thing he could do differently. When he sings after he wins, he just really finishes the song and shows his true personality.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can tell Tyson about boxing. There's nothing anyone can tell Tyson about boxing. He does listen to the great Sugar Hill, and that's maybe on another podcast. Who knows? Maybe Sugar and Tyson come along and tell that story because how they got together is very, very remarkable. I have zero to say when it comes to boxing. All I know is when you're living clean and you're living right, things are going to work out and they're going to work in your favor. And it's been working great for him.
Yeah, it's been working phenomenal. And it's also just as far as the talent goes that he has, I mean, someone that's 6'9" with an 85-inch reach, heavyweight division, moves like a lightweight. I mean, he's in and out. It's honestly a work of art to see him fight. It's an honor to watch him fight and step in the ring. And I can't wait to see him go up against some different competition because he fought in between. Didn't he fight in between the Tyson or the first Deontay Wilder fight? He had a couple fights in between.
Yeah.
But I just can't wait to see him keep progressing through and eventually
Yeah,
fight Anthony.
honestly, July 24th is going to be a big night, and I think
Huge.
two gladiators are really going to go at it. And, you know, I'm excited to be there ringside.
Yeah, and that's at the T-Mobile Arena.
Yes, sir.
When are you heading over there?
I don't know. I haven't really decided when I'll go out. I'm kind of figuring that out of the rhythm of when I want to be there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been to a boxing match, but it just seems like one of those like atmospheres that are just nuts. I mean, I've been to an MMA event and the atmosphere was just crazy. And I was actually going to go to one in New York a couple years ago, but we ended up not getting tickets. But it's just one of those things like what other sporting events do you like to go to and like that you can draw a comparison to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the UFC. The UFC for me is tough. I've sat ringside. I've actually sat ringside with Shaq when the first one, when it came into town in Boston. Me and Shaq were there together. It was really cool. I just don't like the noise. And I grew up, I had a lot of fights growing up, you know, and so on in sports and hockey. And I just don't like the noise of someone's head getting thumped. Like, I just don't like that noise. And with boxing, it's a little different because you don't hear as bad of a thumping. But I've been to, you know, so many ringside fights. I love, to be honest with you, myself and one of my princes from the royal family of Saudi Arabia, we shared floor seats at the Celtics. That was really cool to watch LeBron, you know, right at the half court mark, like run by you. Or for instance, Kobe came over when I used to do some work with Rob Gronkowski, the beginning of Gronk's career. I did a lot of deals for Gronk. Like, Kobe came over and dapped us up. I'll never forget that moment, hugged us and like invited Gronk during the game. He was playing the game. He looks over like, yo, Gronk, man, come play for Philly. I want you to play for Philly.
That's crazy.
And that was just such a cool experience. Like, whoa, here's Kobe, right? The great one.
In the middle of a game.
In the middle of a game, talking over to Gronk, dribbling balls like, yo, Gronk, come over here. And Gronk was like, what? Gronk was like a little kid, you know? So Gronk's a good dude. We did stuff, you know, in the beginning of his career with Dunkin' Donuts and, you know, some Modell's deals and some other deals. So I've kind of always been front and center. Whether it's been boxing, I've been to plenty of ringside stuff well before I knew Tyson, you know, floor seat Celtics. I love hockey. You know, I love all sports. Anything that has passion, I love, whether it's, you know, singing, dancing, arts. I love people that have passion for the arts of what they're doing. So I kind of like anything that people have passion about. I find very amazing to watch.
Yeah. Have you ever heard like any other weird like side conversations between athletes? Because most of the I'm assuming most of the sporting events you've been to, you've had phenomenal seats. Have you ever had any other experiences where athletes are like talking or doing something not related to the game in the middle of it?
Yeah. I've seen stuff that blows my mind. I remember when I was a kid, I won't name him because he's a big brand NHL guy now. Mm-hmm. But I remember in between periods, seeing one of my favorite NHL players. One of my friend's dad was a Boston cop and snuck us into the garden. And I remember seeing him smoking cigarettes between periods. I was like, what? And then, you know, Shaq's told me stories. Even Neymar, you know, through his translator, told me some funny stories. I'm friends with Neymar's dad. So I've been with, you know, Neymar over in Barcelona when he played for Barcelona, you know, spent time in his house and all that stuff. And just, you know, you hear and you see these things, and some of them you just don't even want to repeat because it ruins the beauty of it, right? So maybe, you know, in a couple podcasts or whatever, if we ever get back together, I'll share some more stories with you. I can't give up my guy's stuff though.
No, I understand. I would love to do one definitely again in the future. But now going into or transitioning to Tommy Fury, you actually set up a dinner about a month ago with Tommy, Tyson Fury's son, Shaquille O'Neal, and a couple other people.
Yes.
And then you guys dropped the video.
Jakey, where are you? My uncle's looking for you.
This boxing shit, it's in my blood. I don't play boxing.
If you see this face, you already know what it is. Don't matter the amount. Don't be scared.
So Jake, Logan, anybody else who's out there who wants to back these pussies, please hit us up. I'm taking all bets for any amount of money.
How much you got?
As much as they want. Anytime, any place, anywhere. Let us know. Tommy's knocking Jake the fuck out.
Shug, what are you thinking?
Knockout.
Naga. I'm in. We're ready.
Let's go.
Now drag your pig's face over here and talk to the Chancellor.
We ready, baby? Let's go.
Tommy calling out Jake. First off, that is a great fight. I really hope that fight comes together. But that's a phenomenal fight. That is a phenomenal fight.
It's awesome, right?
Yeah, it would be so popular. I mean, that fight would be massive. I mean, because Jake needs to be tested against a boxer, someone that trains boxing, and Tommy is the perfect opponent for him because they're both young, they're both like up and coming. I think both undefeated. If Jake Paul can get past Tyron Woodley in August, that's a phenomenal fight to make. Tommy just won on June 5th of this month. So, I mean, he's coming off a hot win. What can you tell us a little bit about that dinner and making that video?
So Jakey, I don't know if you saw it. That's my favorite part.
I saw the video.
So what I can tell you is this, right? I see Tommy, I see him as a huge talent. Obviously, you know, I'm there with Tyson, working with Tyson, and Tommy's like this guy, just unbelievable looking guy. It's obvious when you look at him. He looks like he should be a model or a movie star, but he's a killer. He's a great fighter. He's a good dude. He's young, and he's famous, and he has a lot of social media fame simply because he won that Star Island, or I don't know what it's called. Yeah, Love Island. Sorry. It's equivalent to like our Bachelor here in the US. It's a big UK program. So he already had like the fame and everything going, and he could fight, and he's Tyson's brother. So I said, you know, we were going to dinner with Shaq anyway. Shaq, you know, is a fan of Tyson Fury, and obviously Tyson's a big fan of the big man Shaq. It was awesome to get two almost 7-foot giants together. That was really cool.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was, as we're driving there, I'm like, we got to do something, like in my head. So I literally just started writing out a script, and I started telling everyone like their lines, like, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. I knew if we went there, and, you know, things get ruined when they're too overproduced or they're too prepared, right? It's like when you prepare for a big party, it's always a dud. So I knew we were going for dinner. I'd set up the dinner. We're in Miami, you know, Prime 112. And I just said, you know, we got to make the best of this, right? And I said, I know what I'm going to do. So I knew I'm friends with, you know, Logan and Jake. I know them through, you know, the younger years or whatever. I remember companies like not willing to sign them because they didn't know who they were, and they laughed at us. And now they're crying that they didn't sign them, right? Which kudos to those guys. I love what they've done. I reached out to Jake's partner manager, Nikis. I'm like, Nikis, you know, he used to be the former CFO of UFC. I reached out, I'm like, brother, got some friendly fire coming over. You know, he knows who I am, knows what I do at Tyson. And it wasn't really so friendly. Like I said, I have some fire coming over. I was just being a gentleman saying that it was coming, hoping that there would be a response, because Jake doesn't really respond to things that don't move the needle. Well, they had no idea what I had up my sleeve. So when I put this together, obviously, you know, it really pushed the needle. And Jake responded. He's hilarious, right? How he responded. And that really set up the whole entire idea of Jake versus, you know, Tommy. So give you a little insight. The next fight coming up, because Tyron Woodley's already happening, we're pretty close to having Tommy fighting on, you know, on that card as an undercard. And then upon 2 wins from both parties, it being Jake winning and Tommy winning, which we don't foresee any reason Tommy won't win, even though he will be fighting some, you know, a lot tougher challenges than maybe people have deemed in the past. That will lead to, you know, some serious fireworks, right? So we're really excited about that. It's something that, you know, I've talked to, you know, the Warrens over in the UK that kind of, you know, they're the ones who have Tommy, and they've developed Tommy, and, you know, it's nothing but friendly. Mr. Fury himself, we're working through everything, and that boxing lane is you know, it's a funny game. So I just do what I do in regards to endorsements, promotions, and social media activations, and helping, you know, grow their brand. And obviously I love the fighting, so wherever I plug in with the fighting, we do. So
yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, the video that you directed, that's brilliant. But stacking them on the same card, if that happens and if that comes to fruition, that's brilliant, because the exposure for both of them on the same night, that basically plants the seed. I mean, you already planted the seed with your video, but if Tommy gets out there, gets a big knockout before, and just gets on the mic and just says something Jake Paul related, and then, you know what I mean, like, that's just just going to add fuel to the fire. And ultimately, like you said, if they keep stacking up wins, make that potential matchup massive. Like,
yeah, and it's a real matchup. They're about the same size. And look, Jake can fight. Like everyone says, like, oh, this and that. At the end of the day, he has that little brother disease, and that little brother disease is, I'm going to try to knock you out every time. That's why I like him. You know what I mean? I'm a little brother too, so I love it.
Yeah. Okay. A question that I have for you, this isn't really tied into what we just talked about, but how did you get your nickname, The Glue?
So it's a long story. You know, I don't know if we have the whole time for the podcast, but, you know, more or less, I've just always been the person who sees the game of chess, right? And when I see the game of chess, it's like, how do you connect the dots and how do you get the dots to stay? Because so many people want to go behind you and undo instead of creating other dots for you to connect, they want to undo the dots that you've done. It's like crabs in the bucket mentality. A lot of people just have that mentality. And I grew up in a world that is full of that, right? And that was in New England, right? Everyone's crabs in a bucket. I realized that if you focus on connecting your dots and just being really good at connecting your dots, it's kind of like you got to be glue. So it's, you know, a nickname that I got because of the things that I've been able to do. And people scratch their head and they're like, what is he doing? And how, you know, how did he do it? And instead of saying, hey, how can I help? Right? They say, how did he do it?
Yeah.
So everyone's always waiting, you know, for the other shoe to drop or for this or for the negative. And that's not the mindset I have. You know, I live in today. I try to treat everyone right. No one's perfect. And I'm just going to keep trying to move forward. And I think you'll end up exactly where you're supposed to be at the end of the day.
I think I love that nickname. That's a phenomenal nickname. And it fits you well. I mean, what you do, it fits it perfectly. Okay. This is a random question again, or another random question. But if you could partner with any entertainer from the past, who would you choose and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know.
You can say a couple.
Yeah, I mean, look, probably my grandfather. Like he's passed, rest in peace. But I would have loved to have been around him in his youth. He left home when he was 14 and joined the carnival. He signed up early for the military. Like I think he was 16, fighting in World War II. Those are some real dudes. Like those guys that stormed the beach in Normandy. We're nothing. We are nothing. None of us are anything. Whether you're a world champ or the UFC champ, you're nothing. The guys that get off that boat in Normandy and storm the beaches, they're someone.
I couldn't agree
more. And they're
more.
someone bigger than any of us will ever be. And I hope this country remembers that. You know, as we fight about the flag, as we fight about all these things we fight about, it's really sad because so many people gave up their lives so that we can have podcasts and we can have social media. And everyone says, oh, the government, this and that. I understand it. But has anyone took the time to take a deep breath and realize who we are and what our forefathers have done?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like veterans nowadays and veterans of the past are just so underappreciated. And I hate to see it just because, like you said, these guys gave their life. They volunteered their time. They volunteered their life. They volunteered time away from their family, time away from their kids, just to set us up in the future. And I just wish there was more respect.
With what you said, I agree with everything. There's one thing that we all make the mistake of, right?
Mm-hmm.
I make the mistake too. And then I sit back and think about it. Volunteer. Most people now volunteer, but a lot of people died. They were drafted and they had no options.
That's true. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And it's look at, I make the same mistake. That's nothing against you. I think we've all been, you know, brainwashed to make that mistake by the media for whatever it is that they're, you know, whatever the message they're trying to relay of the day. We all forget that a lot of our grandfathers and great grandfathers were drafted. And it's something that I don't think we should ever forget, especially like with Vietnam, World War II, and so on.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings about where I live is obviously it's very sad to go, but I'm not too far from DC and just seeing the Vietnam Memorial. I mean, yeah, it gets you a little emotional, like seeing it, but it's one of those things that it's incredible. Like just seeing it, all the names walking around and just remembering the past. And like, that's how we got to where we are in the world today is through the sacrifice of those men and women.
Amen.
Okay. Before we wrap up, what is, I always ask my guests this at the end of the show, but what is one piece of advice that you have for everyone watching or listening? And it can be any facet of advice.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is wherever you can get an advantage, get the advantage. Whether it's sleeping, living clean, eating cleaner. Like, look, there's so many resources we don't have and natural talents we will never have. But what can we do to be extraordinary? And I think the simplest way to summarize that is this. If you take the word extraordinary and you ask a lot of people what it means, it's a difficult word to define, right? But all it really is putting extra in front of ordinary. That's all it is. It's writing extra in front of ordinary. And if you put the extra in front of ordinary, you get to do really cool things. But you have to believe in it, and you have to be in a place where you don't have any bad habits, and you don't have any reason why people may be, skeptical to bring you around. Mm-hmm. If you're drinking, if you're smoking, if you're gambling, or whatever those things are, whatever the vices people have, or doing drugs, like that stuff might work temporarily. And so many of our youth see that on TV and they say, oh no, we can do this, we can do that. If you want to be great at something and you don't have all of the talent in the world, work will get you, and hard work and being extra in front of ordinary will get you that much further. So if you're sitting, at home and you say, no, I wish I could do this, I wish I could do that, you can do anything you want. Maybe on the next podcast, I'll tell you how, Tyson got himself into the position that he got into and how he believed in himself to become the next world heavyweight champ, which he is now the world heavyweight champ.
Yeah. And he's defending in a couple of weeks. I mean, it's going to be phenomenal. But another thing is, do you have any advice for me? And ultimately, I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. We spoke on the phone the last couple of days, and just anytime you make time for me, I'm super appreciative because I know how busy your schedule is. But ultimately, what was it that, why ultimately did you decide, because I'm sure you could be doing a million things right now, to come on my podcast? And could you give me any advice moving forward as I try to progress my platform?
Yeah, honest to God, brother, we get a lot of requests. We get a lot of, different things and pulled in different directions and, messages and emails. And your email that you sent, you did the extra in front of ordinary. You're extraordinary, dude. Like, you might not have the biggest podcast today, but you're going to have a very big podcast. Why? Because you do the little things. You wrote a great email, right to the point. And real people recognize that. And I immediately recognized that by how you wrote your email, how you took the time, how your follow-up was. That's really important. You did all of those things. You followed up 14 different times where most people quit on the second time. Mm-hmm. You're always going to make it in life when you do things like that. And when anyone sees the tenacity, you'll always make it. You're going to have a huge podcast one day. You just got to keep doing what you're doing, living clean, living right. Everything will work out, dude. Everyone has bad days. Everyone has the same 24 hours, and everyone can go to bed at night.
I'm a big believer of that everyone has the same 24 hours, and it just depends on how you want to spend those 24 hours. But I honestly, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on my show, especially because it's a small platform. This means the world to me. And to speak to someone, not just of your, you've accomplished a lot, but because I'm specifically fascinated with fights, I mean, like boxing, MMA, all sports. So it just made this episode so much more perfect. And that's why that's why I just wanted to keep getting this episode. Like you said, a lot of people would have given up after the second one, but I just knew it would have been great content together. If I was able to get you on the podcast, it would just be phenomenal conversations. And you've dropped some gems of stories for us. It's been a great time. I mean,
I'm a work in progress, as we all are. And I totally appreciate you having us here. We're all works in progress. Every day you take your own inventory. I have a lot of friends that are in the sober community, right? Tyson deals with a lot of mental health. What I learned from my friends that are in the sober community is taking self-inventory, righting your wrongs. That's what I try to do every single day. I try to take my own inventory. And Tyson does that, and he's amazing. He'll tell you, I don't work out to fight. I work out to stay alive. So he stays very active and he moves, and that's what he does. And that's what I try to do. It's good to be around good, positive people. Tyson Fury, you know, has been an amazing person to be around. But you always have to be your own best person and always be amazing to be around yourself. So I'm psyched to be on the show because everything's the same to me, whether you're Joe Rogan or you're exactly who you are. And that's why I'm here, brother.
Everyone, scroll down below in the description. Make sure you follow Chancellor on Instagram at Chancellor2U. Follow Tyson Fury on Instagram, Gypsy King 101, and follow Tommy Fury on Instagram, simply just at Tommy Fury. Is there any other websites or social media accounts that people can find you at?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'll send you, you know, a couple links if I think of them, but we're pretty easy, pretty simple guys. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a big, tall, white heavyweight champion popping on your show soon.
That would be something. I wouldn't even be able to that's just crazy to think about. I mean, honestly, that'd be something. Please like, comment, subscribe, share this video. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you may be listening, please rate 5 stars. And like I said, scroll down in the description and give them all a follow on their social media accounts. And without a doubt, you got to be watching on July 24th. That's the big day.
Amen. Amen. And thank you so much for having us. And we're always here for you, brother. All right.